during the session this evening. So I shall hand you over to Adam, who will introduce himself for anybody that's not met him before, and have a lovely evening, and I hope you enjoy it.
Fantastic, thanks Jo. Well, hello everybody. I recognise quite a lot of faces, which is always lovely. So nice to see some of you again, and welcome if this is your first time joining. My name's Adam, I'm the skit lead for Red Hill Secondary School, and this afternoon we're going to explore what makes a great teacher. Now, I thought rather than just listening to me, it'd be nice for you to listen to some of our trainees. So we've got a selection of primary and secondary trainees that have very kindly joined us this afternoon. So if it's okay, we're going to ask them to briefly introduce themselves. So maybe if you're primary or secondary, a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to hear through them throughout this session. So if we perhaps start with primary, Nadia, would you like to start us off? I think you're in Hogwarts right now. You can
I am in Hogwarts. Hello everyone, I am from the primary cohort in Leicester, so I am training to teach 5 to 11-year-olds.
Lovely, thank you Nadia. And I think we've also got Fazana, are you there?
Hello, hi everyone. I'm sorry I'm not got my camera on because I'm having a bit of technical, I don't even know if you can hear me. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I'm on the primary course in Leicester as well, and I'm on the 3 to 7 course. So yeah, nice to meet you all.
Very brave, 3 to 7. I said that's a secondary teacher. I have a huge amount of respect for primary teachers.
Oh, they're lovely, bless them.
Brilliant. And we've got, I roped in a couple more of my secondary trainees this afternoon, so thank you for joining us. So we start with Jolene.
Hello everyone. So I'm Jolene. I'm training with a secondary skit with Adam, and I'm currently training at a secondary school in German and French. So that's what I'm gonna teach.
Brilliant. And Jolene's just got a job, so we're still celebrating that.
Yay.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jolene. Let's go to our other Nadia next.
Hello, I'm Nadia. I'm training in art and design with Adam, and I'm at my second placement now, but I'm not lucky as Jolene yet, but it will happen.
It will happen. It will happen soon. Lovely. Thanks, Nadia. And finally, Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie. I am on the Red Hill secondary course, and I am training to be a maths teacher, currently based at Red Hill for the entire placement, which is great.
Brilliant. Thank you, Katie. So we're going to hear from our trainees throughout the session. I'm just going to share my screen. We're going to do a few bits on a PowerPoint and then a few bits coming together. So we're going to explore what makes a successful teacher. Now that is a pretty big topic. One we're certainly not going to get the answer to in 45 minutes, but we're going to certainly make a starting point. So I'd like us all to have a bit of a reflection to begin. I want you to think back to school, whether it's primary or secondary or perhaps even university. Think back to your favourite teacher. Who is that one teacher that inspired you, the teacher you still remember the name of now, and it's the teacher that perhaps influenced your career going forward? Think about that teacher for me. And I'd like you to, if you've got a scrap of paper or a post-it or on your phone perhaps, I'm going to give you just 2 minutes. I'd like you to jot down 3 things that made that person your favourite teacher. Okay, going to give you just 2 minutes to do it now. Jot down 3 things that made that person your favourite teacher. Okay, 1 minute. Okay, and what I'd love everyone to do is in the chat bar, can everyone type in their number 1? What was the top 1, the number 1 thing that made that person your favourite teacher? And let's see if there's any commonalities. Stickers. Brilliant. Class is fun. Believed in me when I didn't. Fun. Always give me a push. Really important. Encouraging. Believed. Enthusiasm. Spent time with me. Passionate. Calm. A good one, Chris. Enthusiastic. That's a great list. Any different ones? So already we're starting to see some commonalities, aren't we? Those teachers that can really change lives. Those things, that enthusiasm, that passion, that caring for students, making me feel like I had good ideas. Yeah, sort of giving you, building you up, She dressed well. Very important things. Determined, great. Any different ones? Approachable, brilliant. And to think in a few years' time, other people will be describing you in this way when you're teachers and you've influenced them and they've applied to inspiring leaders to be teachers. They'll be sitting here describing all those great traits that you had that inspired them to become a teacher. That's lovely. Thank you for sharing those. And like I say, I mean, there's a lot of commonalities there, and actually we can start to build up a picture of what maybe a good teacher looks like. Ooh, that's not the screen. So I'm going to talk about 5 traits. Can you see my screen okay? Just give me a thumbs up. Katie, I can see you. Give me a thumbs up. Cool. We're going to discuss 5 key traits, ideas, attributes that might make an outstanding teacher. Now, this isn't to say these are the only 5, and there are many others, and you've just suggested some great ones there, but I want to talk about some ones that we think as inspiring leaders, as a teacher training organisation, are particularly important. And I think first and foremost is creativity. And the joy of being a teacher is being creative. It's thinking, how am I going to take a topic and engage students? How am I going to plant that seed, get them excited, think about how it applies to their life in the future? And being creative, I mean, if you think about Maslow's hierarchy, it's the ultimate thing you can do in terms of self-actualization and motivation and fulfilling what you can do as a teacher. So I think creativity is really, really important. And in a minute, I'm going to ask some of the trainees to maybe think about either ways they've been creative in their lessons or maybe some great practice they've seen of others. But I thought it was only fair that I share an example. So I thought to myself, as I was putting this PowerPoint together, what have I done recently to make a lesson creative? So I thought I'd talk you through. It's only fair that I practice what I preach. So the other day I did a lesson on organization charts, which is every bit as exciting as it sounds. I'm a business teacher, not the most exciting topic in the world. So I thought, right, how can we bring this topic to life? So first of all, and Katie walked into this lesson the other day, I made everyone apply for a job. And we went through the entire recruitment process. They had to fill in application forms. I did psychometric testing in their groups. I shortlisted them. If their application had a spelling mistake, it went in the bin. I was brutal. They got to feel what it's real like. We'd had interviews and everybody got a position in our organization. I then needed to teach them how information flows through an organization. So everyone had a job role. We went outside and we created a human organization chart with pieces of string while you're stood in position. And the board of directors at the top, I gave them messages, and through Chinese whispers, they'd pass them through the organization. And of course, it goes horribly wrong. And it's meant to, because that teaches them that actually in big organizations, communication is difficult. So we do a range of activities to make what is quite a dry topic fun and engaging. And then after that, we fired the manager. We thought they hadn't done a very good job. They had to vote on somebody new. We restructured the organization. We did a whole range of things. And then when we got back into the classroom, they could practically and see how that applied to their learning. So that's my contribution for creativity. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. And if any of our trainees would like to throw in a suggestion, that'd be lovely.
I can make a start. So I don't think, Adam, I can keep up with what you just explained. But actually something I'm quite proud of what I did today, something creative, because we're currently doing with my year 7s, we're talking about school uniform in German. And it's quiet because they're obviously all not the biggest fans of school uniform either. So, or anyway, so in general. So for them, it's quite difficult to talk about the topic because they have quite a difficult opinion about school uniforms and prefer the German system. So I thought making it a little bit interesting and actually created like a washing line on my PowerPoint for tomorrow's lesson. So what they're going to do is they're going to learn about the vocabulary first, and then they will have to tell me which item to put on the washing line. So basically they have this reference to what they know is just normal items of clothing, and they are in charge of what's going to happen because they're in charge of which item goes on the washing line. But it's just something that's accessible and more interesting and just a little bit of engaging, and hopefully makes this entire topic, which they're not particularly keen about, more interesting.
Thanks, Jolene. And that's the joy of when the joy of teaching is when you take something you think kids won't care about and that light switch goes off, isn't it? Or, you know, and I don't know about you guys, but I tend to have lesson ideas at the most obscure times, 2 in the morning, the notepad, I'm out for a run and think, oh, that's a great idea. I'll jot that down. And you try it. And the more mad they are, often they're the best lessons. And they're the lessons that you use year after year after year because the students love them and you know they're effective. That's lovely, Jolene. Have you got a primary example? Would anyone like to share one?
Yeah, I can share one. Mine's slightly different though. So although, yes, as a teacher, you need to be super creative, sometimes your best sources of creation are the children themselves. Mm-hmm. So something specific that I did was when we were teaching science, the whole topic was on light because it was year 3s. And actually we were talking about shadows, and I had them come up with the experiment that we were going to do. Of course, that required some support, and it always does, but it was about taking their creation to make the activity creative, to make the lesson creative. So they found it purposeful, they found it meaningful, and they were really engaged. I found that worked quite well.
That's great. Yeah, empowering your young people, because there's nothing more creative than young people and children, is there? We tend to get it beaten out of us as we get older, which is quite sad, isn't it? But to have that in front of you, that's a resource. I think that's great. Thank you, Nadia. Right, I'm going to go on to our next one now. So
they might get prizes. I think most of us in school got prizes if we did very well. Maybe we did.
Lovely, thank you. Right, we're now going to talk about emotional intelligence and resilience. Now, emotional intelligence is quite a big one. As a teacher, you're not really just a teacher, are you? You're a teacher, you're a parent, you're a social worker, you're police, you're everything, really. The amount of hats you wear in your day as a teacher is quite remarkable. And as a consequence, you need to have really good emotional intelligence. And we're only spending a few minutes on this now, but that's thinking about self-awareness, empathy. Empathy is such an important trait as a teacher, because actually teaching is relationships. It really is. So to have empathy and to put yourself in the shoes of somebody else and think about their needs, if you can do that, that's what makes you a great teacher. That's how you have strong relationships. That's how you have great learning. Motivation, self-regulation, which can be tricky because it's a tiring job, which is the next picture in a second, and social skills, because you engage with such a range of stakeholders, and that's another slide we're going to think about in a second. So emotional intelligence is a real big thing. And I was about to say I'm not sure you can learn it. I think you can, but I think there's just so many scenarios as a teacher that you might not have seen yourself in before. And I think it's really important. And that's the great thing about the skits. You have that year training program and people to support you and think about how you might react and deal with certain situations. The second one, and it's never been more appropriate to talk about resilience than training during a pandemic, as I'm sure some of you came to our last session, and some of our trainers will tell you, it's been a challenge this year. I mean, it's a very difficult course anyway. Teaching is a very hard career. It's a great career. It's a rewarding career, but it's a challenging career. And so resilience is of vital importance. And I love this meme. It's my favorite meme. Teachers in September, teachers in December. And it's pretty accurate in my opinion, because it's a hard job. And you know, we have long holidays, but that's because we work very intensely during those term times. And I think resilience is a really key skill. And some days you do need to fake it till you make it, because you're perhaps under the weather, you've been up all night planning and marking, and sometimes you just need to push through. So resilience is a really important skill. And again, it's maybe not something you can learn, but throughout that training program, you start to think about how you can support yourself and use people around you to support you. So I'm going to unshare now, and I think this is quite a broad one, but if any of the trainees would like to talk about perhaps a time they've used emotional intelligence, or how they've kind of, whether you can learn resilience or whether you sort of build it up just through the program, I'm going to stop sharing and I might pick on Katie, if you wouldn't mind talking about one of those.
I think resilience is a thing that develops as you go through the course. I think I remember I've talked about September recently and how I was this very scared trainee coming into the school and being like, well, what's going on? And thinking about all the things that you have to do and kind of manage as the year progresses. And everyone talks about how you need to have this resilience as this skill. But I think building up your teacher stamina is definitely something that just happens over time. I think you get better and better at coping with the increased workload because it goes at such a gradual rate. You kind of get used to managing all the things you have to do, and then it's like, okay, right, let's throw a little bit else at you, but you're only like, okay, let's handle this. And I think resilience is definitely something that I've developed and gotten so much better at and coping with this. And I do say I have got a pretty good teacher stamina now. I can cope with most things, and it just develops and you will get used to it. I think people have a really great ability to adapt to the situation that is required of them. And I've noticed that in other professions and careers as well, but especially with teaching, you kind of adapt to what is required of you. It just happens, which is really sad. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, thanks, Katie.
Can I add to that?
Please do.
Because I think what Katie said very important is adaptability. So when we had to teach during the lockdown, one of the things I was told by one of our uni mentors was actually that resilience doesn't mean that you have to be strong all the time and that you have to cope with everything. It's just about how you react to certain things and how adaptable you are, and whether even when, because obviously teaching is such a roller coaster ride throughout the training, but I think even beyond that. And I think it's more about how you react to the things rather than being strong all the time, rather than being able to cope with everything. It's more about how you react, and yeah, how you then maybe pick yourself back up when you had a phase where you weren't feeling particularly great, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, Jolene. It's not about necessarily being strong all the time, isn't it? But I think it's how you react to that situation. And Katie's right, you know, it's a tough career, but the skit is designed to build things up very, very gradually. You're not on there in week 1 teaching 40 or 20 lessons, you know. You're there to be supported at all times by your mentor, your class, your learning coach, the class mentor, all those things. And that very slow and incremental improvement, increase in teaching. I remember when I started teacher training, someone said to me that there's tired and then there's teacher tired. And I can see the trainees nodding along with me, because you know you will never have a problem sleeping as a teacher. It's very rare I make 10 o'clock in an evening because I'm fast asleep, but you know that resilience does come, and Jo's the same, because Jo's like me, she gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning. But you know, they always say, don't they, if you want something doing, give it to a busy person. And I think that's true of teachers sometimes. So lovely. Right, we'll go on to our next one. So knowledge. So this is very interesting from the primary and secondary perspective, because actually, and I can't speak for the primaries, I'll let them speak for themselves in a moment, but I think as a primary teacher, you're kind of 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 teachers rolled into one, aren't you? So secondary, you're a specialist in one particular area, perhaps a very, very deep knowledge in a very specific area. Whereas primary, in many ways, you're a jack of all trades. So I think knowledge is really important. And it doesn't matter how long you've been teaching for, because knowledge always changes and specs always change, and you know, exam boards always change and those things. And we're going to talk about being a reflective practitioner later on, but that's such an important thing, knowing where your strengths are and where are the gaps in your knowledge, and being a lifelong learner, because that's what teaching is, it's being a lifelong learner. Where are the gaps in your knowledge? What are the things you want to find out? How can you grow as a person? And so I think knowing what your strengths are and areas of development in knowledge is a really, really important trait of being a great teacher. So it'd be lovely to hear from a primary perspective. So perhaps, Fazana, would you mind if I picked on you to talk a little bit about knowledge and how you found training in quite a few subjects?
Yes, absolutely. So basically, obviously teaching a primary curriculum, you're teaching, of course, the national curriculum, many, many different subjects now. And personally, I want to say I did struggle with this aspect a little bit, because it was more forgetting the primary knowledge and, you know, more the adult education for me. So it's coming back to all of the you know, the verbs, adjectives, division, stuff like that. So I just think one thing that really, really helped me was every time I plan a lesson, I really rehearse my lesson to make sure I know what I'm talking about before delivering this to the children, because I'm thinking, what are the possible questions that they could be asking me? What are their misconceptions? So really know what you're about to teach before teaching it, because sometimes things could crop up and you're just like, hold on, I don't have a clue myself. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I add to that?
Yes,
just
please.
quickly. So the course don't kind of just throw you in at the deep end and be like, here, teach this lesson on division. It's you get specific sessions where you're trained by specialists in that field. So you get trained by a maths lead or a maths teacher or an English lead. So you get given the subject specific knowledge that you need. Something that's helped me is that make sure your lessons are researched beforehand. So it's great knowing your lesson inside and out, but like Fazana said, you'll get these questions that crop up out of nowhere, but don't be afraid of them either. So if you get a question, be like, oh, actually, no, I don't know that. Let's find out together and research it with the children. And you'll find actually they're really engaged with that, because if you don't know something, they're like, oh, Miss Actor doesn't know it. Let's try and find out together. So don't never be afraid of the amount of knowledge you need to know, especially at a primary level, because it's quite broad and there's quite a lot of it. But for me, that makes it really interesting.
Absolutely. And it doesn't matter how long you've been teaching for, there'll always be a kid that asks a question you don't know the answer to. And that's the joy. That's the joy of teaching. You know, you don't want every day to be the same, and you'll always be asked, you'll always be challenged. And I think that's the way you describe that, Nadia, is brilliant. I'm going to actually, other Nadia from secondary just left, so I won't ask her. But Katie was in quite a unique position. She did an English degree and then retrained in maths before becoming a maths teacher this year with Inspiring Leaders. Katie, would you tell us a bit about knowledge acquisition from your perspective? Because you learned an entire new subject in the space of about 6 months.
I did, yes. So when I applied for the course, I applied last April, and I was like, okay, I want to teach maths, because maths was the best thing that I did at school, but I did go on and do an English degree. So I said to Adam and Sally, I was like, I really want to do it. And they're like, okay, do a ski course. So I think I learned that all the content of the maths curriculum whilst I was in lockdown. Very lucky to be on furlough. So I kind of taught myself then and thought, okay, I'm in a really great position to start in September. And then looking back now, I think the amount of knowledge that I've learned since September is just crazy. So I know primary talk about it being quite a broad curriculum. I feel like I've learned in depth a lot about all the maths, and I'll constantly say to my mentor, I'm like, I'm pretty good at maths now. I feel like I've learned quite a lot. And I think building that confidence with me was something that was really important. And one of the teachers that I have been really lucky to sit and observe an A-level lesson for the entire year, she came to me the other week with an exam question. She's like, here you go, I'm going to give our year 12s this, what do you think? And I was like, oh, okay. And I was talking aloud as to how I would solve it. And she's like, yeah, that's not what I would do, but that's perfectly reasonable. I really like the method. And having that confidence to kind of talk aloud in a workroom about maths and be like, not afraid to make a fool of myself is crazy. And I said to her, I'm like, you've done this because listening to you teaching those year 12s, the A-level course, which is something that was quite intimidating for me, has just been like wondrous, really, because she's kind of provided me with that confidence in the A-level side of things whilst going through the other bits, and teaching the course myself to like year 7, 8, 9 and 10 has kind of developed the other areas of maths as I've kind of gone on and teaching it. So it's kind of crazy what I've learned on the course and also before the course as well.
That's great, thanks Kate. And there's something really valuable about that, I think when you recently learn something, because as you've just gone through that process yourself, when you explain it to children or to students, you can show that stages of thinking and that modelling and that scaffolding. I think when you've taught for a long time, sometimes you kind of, you forget what the kids don't know, and therefore your teaching becomes a bit not as thorough. So I think the way that Katie, you've described that, I think that's a really effective approach to teaching. And that's why it's important to be a lifelong learner, because you're constantly thinking about the methods and the approaches to teaching. So I'm going to pick on, I'm going to call you primary and secondary Nadia. Secondary Nadia. Very different with art, and I love it when you come into the office and tell me great things you've learned or artists you've been researching. From your perspective and knowledge, what knowledge did you have? What have you had to learn? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I said the art is so broad, and I'm on my second placement now, and every school teach art differently. They teach different periods of art. So sometimes I might know key artists on a certain part, but I don't know in depth, and then I have to go and practice what we're going to teach them, because sometimes I've not even done a skill that we're teaching the kids before, and I'm like, oh, I better go away and I should have a play and do it myself. So I'm constantly learning, and through that process I get to not only teach myself but how I teach the kids. So I love it. I'm always on my toes. Like, my specialism is contemporary art and filmmaking and photography. I can still paint, I can still draw, I can do all that, but it's great. I love it, because it's like I'm not only learning, I'm learning how to teach the kids, and I'm now going to start teaching photography, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm actually really excited because I've got my first photography lesson tomorrow and I'm bricking it, but at the same time I'm like, yeah, bring it on, let's teach Andy Warhol and how to make an Andy Warhol portrait. Can't wait. So
like Nadia, Nadia's teaching a topic, like, and sometimes she come in on a Monday and go, look, I spent 5 hours drawing this example for the group weekend. Like, I think it's really ornate.
That resource so long. So I think every subject's different, but like Katie with maths, she'll have so many resources she has to make for thousands of, like, she'll have like 18 lessons and have to make all these resources. I have one to make for a whole year 8, but it will take me 5 hours to make that one thing. And also, so it's the same length of time, just my outcome's 1 and Kate's will be like 30.
And also you do something you love, don't you? And that's the joy of the profession, because it's not work when you enjoy something, and when you teach a subject you're passionate about, that's not work, is it?
That's for sure. I love it. I wouldn't change it. It's not a chore.
Lovely, thanks Nadia. Right, the next the next topic is professionalism. So I'm not going to share a slide for this, because actually professionalism is something it's very important to consider what it is to be a professional. And I think it's also something people struggle to think about, well, what is it to be a professional? So I'd like to throw that question out to everybody using the chat bar, please. What does it mean to be a professional? And don't worry if you don't feel like you know the answer, but in your mind, put down what you think. What does it mean to be a professional? Boundaries, that's a good one, Polly. Consistency, that's a great one. Hold yourself to a standard. Yeah. Respect. The role, understanding, and development. Good. Hardworking. Yep. Hi, Amanda, by the way. I know Amanda. Part of the community. Great. Integrity and trust, Martha, great words. Separating work and home lives. Yeah, that's important, Rosie, because it's a full-on job and you need to have that balance. That's good. Authenticity, very important idea, okay, because students they can, if you're being inauthentic, the kids will call it out in a heartbeat. That's really important. Understanding and an open mind, great. Sincerity to your work, these are lovely answers, really lovely. Any others? Brill. So actually, I think what you said there, or sorry, more taking part in wider responsibilities in school and ensuring you're able to work collaboratively with the team, ensure you demonstrate values, resilience, perseverance, and so on. I think that's a lovely answer, Fazana. Actually, I might ask you to expand on that a bit, if that's all right, Fazana. Can you tell us about what your experience is like of entering the profession and the expectations of what it is to be a professional? Would you mind elaborating a little bit? If you can hear me.
Sorry, Adam, I missed that.
No worries. Well, I was just saying that's a lovely answer. Would you mind expanding a little bit? Perhaps talk to us what it was like to join the profession and what it's like to, to be a professional in a school environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So joining the profession, we work collaboratively. So obviously when we joined the profession, we've joined during COVID, so it's been quite difficult. But again, it's just sort of taking on board the values, adapting, ensuring that you're working collaboratively with your team, your colleagues on the course, also colleagues in school as well, and also in placement as well. So at the moment I'm in a placement where they really they really tell the children about different values, so resilience, perseverance, respect, kindness. And I just think it's very important for us as teachers as well to demonstrate that to the children. So again, working collaboratively as a team, taking part in the wider school ethos as well. So just really working as a team, to be honest, and just really taking on board the values. Yeah. Lovely. Sorry, there's a lot to say, and I just don't know what to say, to be honest.
You're wrapping that beautifully, because being in a school is a very unique environment. In a way, you're part of the community, aren't you? And I think it's important. You have a singular role, but you're also very much part of that team. And you're, even though you teach certain students, all the students in your school, your responsibility in a way, and you're part of that wider community.
Definitely.
Thank you for that. Jolene, what about your perspective? How have you found it in terms of what it is to be a professional? And obviously you came from Germany, so there might be some different perspectives there too.
Yeah, so for me, it was I think at the start of the year, I wasn't really aware of all the responsibilities you would have as part of a school community and as a teacher. And I actually surprised myself, and I think I'm probably not the only person. I surprised myself with how well I fit into these different responsibilities and roles, because as you said, you're not only a teacher, you're also part of a team of your department, and then you're part of the wider school community. So you want to represent the school well, you want to represent your team well, you want to represent your own personality as a teacher well. So I think it's probably when I used to work in Germany in a completely different career, but I had different standards maybe, and it wasn't as maybe they weren't as high, to be honest. And I think it's really nice because you really maybe exceed your own expectations, because at the start of the year you were just kind of almost thrown into this new career and you didn't really know what to expect, and then you just find yourself adapting to certain roles and adapting to certain expectations, and I personally found that I absolutely love it because I feel part of this. The more responsibilities I take on, the more I feel like I'm actually part. So even now in my training year, I feel like I'm a fully accepted member in the school community, as well as my team and as well as a teacher. So no one really makes a difference between me and any other person. I think that's because of how well I adapted, and I think all of our trainees, so everyone I know about, just feel the same. So I think that's something really, really nice and really special experience.
That's lovely. Thanks, Jolene. I'm just going to introduce Alex Bartley, who's just joined us. He is a PE secondary trainee here at Redhill. So once he's settled in, we might throw the next question Alex's way. So prepare yourself, Alex. So let me just share my screen again. So the next thing we're going to talk about is communication. Now, teaching is quite an unusual job in the sense that you're always on stage, if you like. You're never really behind the scenes, are you, as a teacher? Because schools are busy places and there are students and colleagues everywhere, and you're always communicating in one form or another. So I think it's important to think about the types and skills we need for communication. So the first one there says listening, which in many ways might be the most important skill. whether that's to colleagues, to students, because there can be a tendency to sort of hear them but not listen to them. So I think there's a real difference there, and it's worth reflecting on the difference between those two things. Being friendliness, how do you convey that in your communication? When you're tired, it may not always be easy, but having that kind of giving off that the correct image, I suppose, and that you want to give that welcoming environment to students. Open-mindedness, especially in your training year, because you're going to be, I don't know, exposed is the right word, or introduced to a whole new range of people and ideas and philosophies and a whole new career. And it's really important you throw yourself into that and have that sense of open-mindedness, because, you know, it's a brilliant career, but it might feel a bit overwhelming at times, but embrace that. I think it's important to have that sort of growth mindset and that open-mindedness. Feedback, and again, I'm going to come back to this shortly, really important, because not only are you going to be getting feedback endlessly in your training year, of course, as a teacher, you're giving feedback. And I think actually it's really helpful to remember how it feels to be a trainee and receive feedback, because it's no different than how you give your students feedback and how they feel. So I think that's a really helpful thing to consider, especially when you've been teaching for a few years. How do your students feel when you're giving feedback? How are you being constructive and productive in that feedback? Confidence. Now, I said earlier, some days you might fake it till you make it, or perhaps in those early weeks you don't feel like the teacher in the room, so you're going to act that way. But you become that teacher, and often, you know, your confidence will grow with time, with the support of your mentor and the people on your course and your colleagues. That confidence will come. But that is a form of communication, isn't it? And when students look at the teacher in the front of the room, they want to see that they're a confident person that knows how to sort of lead and support that group. And, you know, I think it's at 70% of communication is non-verbal. So that's body language, the way we say things, the way we do things. That's really, really important as well. So Alex is a PE teacher, so there's quite a lot of things there that might be open to discussion. So Alex is happy to. I'm going to throw the topic of communication his way, and perhaps you can tell us a little bit about what you think why that's an important trait or skill to have as a teacher.
Yeah, hello, good afternoon, everybody. Again, I've literally been kind of thrown into the frying pan, so to speak. Yeah, I'm a PE teacher currently at the Red Hill Academy. And from what I've just seen there, again, I've unfortunately not been able to see the whole kind of meeting so far. But from what I've seen there, communication, as Adam's rightfully said, is so important. There's a bit of a saying, what somebody way smarter and way more educated than me said, but you know, you've got twice as much ears as your mouth, so you've got to listen twice as much as you speak. And that's something what I always try to do, particularly with students and particularly with PE, where it's a subject where, you know, it's like Marmite. You either love PE, you either want to go outside and you want to, you know, run around the field for hours and hours and hours, or you absolutely hate it and you just don't want to do anything, or even thought of getting changed, or even thought of being outside, you absolutely hate. So I think particularly for PE, but in terms of teaching in general, it's all about listening to that verbal, but then also reading those non-verbal cues from students and being able to kind of pick up on that body language and listen to what they're saying, or what they're trying to say as well, because what they might say might not necessarily be what they mean, and then being able to articulate your points and being able to kind of express the purpose as to why they're doing something, or express the reason why you're doing something, and justifying yourself to them as well. Feedback is a massive one as well, particularly if you're going to be a trainee teacher. Pretty much every single lesson you would teach, you should and you would be getting feedback from your host teacher, who, you know, will be telling you kind of tips and tricks that they've picked up along the way, what they would probably recommend or help you to do. And obviously that's such invaluable information, because they've been teaching for, in some cases, you know, decades. So to have that feedback, it's crucial that you kind of take that on board, and not necessarily copy and paste yourself to be like that teacher, but absolutely take kind of those key bits and use that into your own teaching style.
That's great, Alex. And you've touched on lots of important points there. And I think one of the really important points you said there is actually we're working with young people, and they can't always communicate themselves in the way that we can. And that's when that emotional intelligence comes in, doesn't it? We need to be able to read body language or read changes in behaviour and initiate those conversations. So I think, Alex, you've really identified a really key aspect there of communication. A primary perspective would be great. Now, do you want to talk us a little bit about communication in a primary setting?
Yeah, of course. So in a primary setting, the children are obviously very small. And I think the way I look at it is that 80% of your day is you listening to the children. So you need to build that into your lessons also. So think about it, it's going to be 20% of you talking, you giving that input, but 80% needs to be you listening to them, listening to what they have to tell you, their ideas, how they're feeling, how they're thinking. And I think especially when the children are so young, you are taking that very much parental role. You are that pastoral figure for them whilst they're in school. So there are a lot of issues that potentially you don't think might crop up. You just have to remember to communicate with the children and with the adults. But I think also from a professional perspective, don't be afraid to ask for help. Every single adult around you is always willing to help. I've never met an adult in this profession that doesn't want to help you. It's just the nature of teachers. So if you're struggling with an aspect of your teaching or a subject, just ask someone, and it might be a 5-minute conversation, it might be a 10-minute conversation, but you will feel so much better. So learn to communicate yourself as well as with the children. Great advice, Nadia. Thank you. And you're right. And people go into this profession because they have a certain personality type. They want to help others, and that's true of your colleagues as well. Lovely. Right. The final trait or skill or attribute, in my opinion, and also the trainees think, is the most important one. Whenever I interview trainees for the course, I want to know 2 things. Can they be reflective? Can they respond to feedback? And my trainees are smiling because I always go on about this, but it's so important. If you can be reflective, then you're going to be a good teacher. If you can't be reflective, you're not going to be a good teacher. Because being reflective, it's a cycle. And that's not just being a teacher, that's your whole life. And being a reflective practitioner, I reflect on everything, because I think it's very important to think about what's gone well, what hasn't gone well, how you're going to change it next time. And I think what's crucial about the reflective cycle is it allows you to distance yourself, because there can be a tendency in teaching to take things personally, and you mustn't take things personally. If you're getting feedback on a lesson that didn't go great, it's not an attack on you as a person, your character. They're trying to critique your professional behaviours to improve them, so you're a better teacher. It's never personal. So let's have a look at this cycle. So let's start with the experience at the top. Let's say you've taught your lesson with year 10, the behaviour was pretty poor. Okay, and that's fine. It's a training year, things aren't going to go great. Don't beat yourself up. First of all, think, right, I still teach lessons now, the behaviour might be poor. Think, right, okay, why was it poor today? I don't think that's my fault. Well, it is my fault, but I don't blame myself. I think, what was the reason why the behaviour was poor? So reflection on the action. I might think, okay, and I often do this walking home or driving home. Actually, that task in the middle was a bit too long, or that topic was really boring today, or I just spoke for too long and the students disengaged and their behaviour started to slip. So I've reflected upon the reason why the behaviour slipped. I then might go away and look at a bit of theory. There's loads of great textbooks we'll refer to you to in the course. I might get some advice on how to deal with behaviour management, or how to create pace in my lessons or engagement in the task. Right, okay, great. There's an opportunity here to do some paired work and some feedback or some differentiation. I've looked at some theory. I'm going to prepare that lesson again now for next time. I might teach the same year 10 group tomorrow, or it's just the same, a different year 10 group with the same content. I'm going to prepare something different and try it again. Go back into that lesson and try something new. Oh, great. They were much more engaged today. The behavior was much better. Fantastic. I completed that reflective cycle, and then I'll reflect again. What else? And that's so important, because you will have bad lessons. We all do. And that's absolutely fine, as long as you reflect on them and think about how you improve them. And like I say, don't take it personally. The kids didn't behave badly because I'm a bad person. It's because the lesson was, the activity was a bit boring, and that was my fault. I could change that for next time. This helps you to distance yourself from that. Think about it as a profession. We talked about professionalism a minute ago. This is a really important skill and tool to have as a professional to improve. And always ask the question, what can I do better? That's how you become a really great and outstanding teacher. So that's my pitch for being a reflective practitioner. I'm going to throw this out again to our trainees. Nadia, secondary Nadia, they're all of our trainees are brilliantly reflective, but I know that Nadia is particularly acutely good at this. Nadia, can you tell us a bit about your experiences of being a reflective practitioner?
Yeah, I mean, my first ever observation was by Adam, and I walked into the office and I said, right, I know what I could have improved on. And Adam went, no, I don't care about that. I want to know firstly what went well. So I think it's really important, because being reflective, you are constantly wanting to improve and make yourself better. And that's the whole point. But you also need to sing what you've done well and know what your strengths are, because you can put them away, use them next time, and then work on what could have been better. But I think it's not you being critical, it's just you wanting to improve, so that actually the education within your classroom is better for the next time for those pupils. But it could be the most minor thing. I mean, I changed my seating plan last week and the whole dynamic in the classroom's changed. It could be that I didn't make something, like last week, my year 9s didn't know what the Grand Canyon was. I just assumed they knew what the Grand Canyon was. So I did a starter, spoke about the Grand Canyon, how vast it is. And they just looked at me like I was talking nuts. And they actually put their hand up and said, what's the Grand Canyon? So looking back, I reflected, right, my starter would have been asking them if they knew what the Grand Canyon was and talking about it. So it's being reflective is just you going to improve for future. So next year, if I had to teach that topic again, I know what I could have done for next time. But you also need to really, I think it's really important that you speak about your strengths and really use them, because I think it's such a hard year and you are constantly given feedback. And you know what, sometimes you need to sit down and go, I am a bloody good teacher. And you know what, you need to sing those praises, because it's not easy. It's bloody not easy. So I think it's important to sit back sometimes and be like, I'm good, and actually look at your strengths as well as your areas you need to improve on.
Yeah, well said, Nadia. And that's so important, because, you know, my example is about improvement, but you must also, where are your strengths? What are you good at? Give yourself that pat on the back, because all of our trainees are fantastic. And sometimes they need reminding of that, because they're so desperate to improve. They focus on the negative. And it's not a negative, it's an area for development, but you must focus on the positives too, all the things that are going well. This is a tough year. And, you know, we encourage you to keep a journal, because week by week you will change your practice and you'll look back and think, wow, look how far I've come. And it's important to reflect upon that and think about all the strengths that you now have that maybe you didn't have at the start of the course, or even perhaps just a few weeks ago. Jolene wrote in the chat bar, top tip, the best time to reflect is in the car. I couldn't agree more, Jolene. Like, if it's sunny like today, I walk to school, so I walk home. On a day like today where I've not stopped since about 7:30 this morning, I've not had a minute to process anything. So I'll walk home in 40 minutes in silence and I'll process the day, and it's lovely. It's just time to think about things, reflect upon things, think about tomorrow, and then I get home in a much, hopefully, better, clearer headspace and not thinking about work. Lovely. Anyone else like to contribute? I think it's such an important one. It'd be nice to get some more perspectives. No moonwalking.
I think I would like to add something to what Nadia said, because I think what's really important is that sometimes, because you get so much feedback, it's important to, I think Alex said it as well, to maybe filter a little bit as well, and don't just take everything on board, but take on board the things that actually help you to improve your practice or could add to your practice. Because I think that's probably the best thing you can do. And then what you said as well, it's not about you as a person, but more as you as a teacher. And I think when you have the school where you feel really comfortable and feel accepted and respected, then it's really easy to not take it personally. Because I was really worried at the start of the year to get feedback, because I'm quite a I don't know how to say that in English actually, but I'm quite a stubborn person, and I don't really like being criticized. Let me say, oh, that's what my thought process was at the start of the year. And then I received my first feedback from a mentor, and I felt like it wasn't actually a problem. Quite the opposite. I was really grateful, and I actually took it on board straight away. And I think it's really nice to see this process of just getting used to feedback and taking it as something that is really useful and really enriching, rather than something that feels like criticism or makes you overthink your own practice, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Jolene. That's really, really important. That's a great perspective. Anyone else like to come in on that topic or that idea?
Yeah, from a primary perspective also, I think similar to Jolene, when I came into the training year, I was like, don't quite like being observed, makes me nervous. And then being told, oh, you've not done this quite correctly, it can be very, very easy to take it personally. I think for me, the part that was really important was when I took that feedback and actually put it into a lesson, seeing the impact it had with the children. And the first time that I did that, I realized this feedback is really, really important, because look at what it's done. I've implemented what they've told me and it's worked. And there's such a massive impact from that. So it's really important to know that they're not giving you feedback for no reason. The reason they're doing it is to make you a better teacher, and you will see that as you go along on the course.
Brilliant. That's the important thing to remember. Everyone wants to be a better teacher. It's never personal, it's about developing you as a professional. And as Joe has said in the chat bar, reflection and feedback equals growth and development. I couldn't have said it better myself. Fantastic. So to summarize then, we've talked about what we consider 5 key attributes to be a successful teacher. So creativity, emotional intelligence and resilience, knowledge and professionalism, communication, and being a reflective practitioner. 5 very, very important traits. But that's not all of them. And you will all have individual things that will make you a great teacher. So I'm going to throw this final question out to our trainees or anyone else that would like to contribute. What other things make a successful teacher? Those are 5 key areas. And this is quite a big question to throw at you with no preparation. But what other things make a successful teacher?
Well, I've got one to to say straight away, because I remember that we had a session with actually the head teacher at my current placement school, when we were all worried about applying for jobs and weren't really successful at the start of this application process. And he said to us that what makes you a good teacher is you. So you as a person is what makes you a good teacher. And I think that's really important, because actually it's stuck with me ever since, that whenever I doubt myself or have my imposter syndrome, and I think it's quite a big thing in this career to have, that people just maybe don't always believe in themselves. I think it's really important, and it helps me a lot to just remind myself of that what makes me a good teacher. And I observed quite a few expert teachers the other day, and they were all just themselves. They were simply themselves, and it made them a great teacher. And they didn't do a lot of things they had a lot of things in common in terms of their practice, but there was always this little bit of personality that made them outstanding. And I think that's really important.
Brilliant. Yeah, being yourself, so important. Like I said earlier, students, they want authenticity, as Nadia said. Brilliant. In the chat bar, we've got adaptability and flexibility, really crucial, particularly in the pandemic. Amanda said to want to be able to make a difference to young people's lives. Brilliant. That's our why, isn't it? It's our core purpose. Empathy, ability to build strong relationships, kindness, clear objectives, really important. What's the purpose of what you're doing? Would any of the trainees like to, we're going to finish in a few minutes' time, would like to add any final comments in terms of what other things they think makes a successful teacher?
I'll chip in. I'd firstly, just to echo what Nadia said about adaptability and flexibility, that is probably the most crucial one for me. I mean, you can plan the perfect lesson in textbook, you know, and then your computer could crash, or your USB won't work, or there's no printing in the morning, or the system can go down. Or from a PE perspective, you could have the fantastic outdoor lesson on tennis, and then you have to go inside because it's snowing. Like you never know. And so being able to kind of prepare yourself for the worst and prepare yourself for every single kind of possibility is so crucial. But for me, it's being yourself and being human. I mean, in my experience of school, every time I look back, the teachers, what really appealed to me was those teachers who you knew about them. It wasn't just somebody in a shirt and a tie. It wasn't just somebody in a dress at the front, kind of talking about science, geography, history, whatever it is. There's those people who you could tell actually had a genuine kind of interest in the subject. It's those people who you could tell cared about you and wasn't just there to kind of tick a box and get a grade. It was that personal approach and that personal touch to teaching. So that's kind of my big thing is being yourself, being unique. You're not going to be kind of, there's no point copying and pasting yourself as another teacher. You just got to be you, because, you know, everything works differently for every person. So just be the best you can.
Right. Motivational speaker you should be, Alex. That was great.
I try.
No, that's really, really good advice. And final couple of comments in the chat bar. Jolene said positive relationships with students. And Nadia has said, really importantly, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Children do love it when you make a mistake, because they see that you're human, but also you learn together. So there is a real joy in that. So they really love that. Wonderful. Right. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions. We've got just a few minutes left. Would anyone like to ask any of our trainees a question? Doesn't matter if it's primary or secondary or something more generic, but you're very welcome. We've got a few minutes now if you'd like to ask any of our trainees or myself and Joe or Brona a question. There you go. We've been so thorough. There's no questions required. Brilliant. In which case, Joe, I think I'll hand over to you. Any wrap up you'd like to do? Thank you so much, everybody that's joined this afternoon, and thank you for our speakers. Hopefully it's been useful. In fact, we have got a question quickly before we wrap up. That's a good question, Jennifer, actually. Let's spend a minute discussing that. Do you ever want to give up? I think that's a really good question. Would anyone like to come in on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there are so many moments, especially during this training and then with lockdown and everything, where you just think, oh God, how can I ever get that right? I will never get that right. But as I said earlier, it's like a roller coaster ride. And then when you're at the bottom, you go uphill, it goes uphill again. So you think like, oh, I want to give up. And then the next day, it actually is much better already. And then you think, why would I give up? I'm quite good and I like it and it feels right. So I think you have these moments, but I think it's just about hanging in there and just waiting for the next day to come. And then most of the time it just feels better already.
I love that analogy. Great analogy, the roller coaster. Was somebody else going to say, thanks, Jolene? Was someone else going to come in?
Yeah, to add to that, it can be tough sometimes, and maybe you're having a bad day. But for me, standing in front of the children, they make your day better instantly. It's like a switch that happens. You might be feeling awful at the start of your lesson, and there's no one in your classroom at the moment. You've walked through your door, you're feeling awful. One child comes in and they've bounded in, they've given you the biggest smile in the world, and suddenly your day's better. So just remember why you're doing things, but instantly, even if you feel like giving up, the children are there and they will push you to keep wanting to go on.
Great, that's it, and that's why we do it, isn't it? We do it for the students, we do it for the children, and they, you know, one kid can make your day, and that's all you need. That's a worthwhile day. You got out of bed for a reason that day. That's lovely. Right, we've got a couple of final questions. It's 5 to 5. We'll just have 5 more minutes. If you need to leave, that's absolutely fine. Priya's asked. I've asked this before with previous trainees, but how would you say for us to prepare for the course? So I'll throw that out to the trainees as well, if that's okay. What's your advice in terms of how to prepare, considering it's now May? They've got perhaps a few months.
Sleep. You won't sleep again for a year. Sleep.
I would just say,
Have a thick skin.
carry on, Nadia. What was that?
Have a thick skin. Because it's exhausting. You are juggling plates all the time. I think one thing you've got to remember, there's so much stuff you have to balance that it's okay. You won't get loads of jobs done in one night. You just have to chip away, and you're human, and actually use your skit. Trainees, lean on them, because they are your saving grace sometimes. They've been mine this year anyway.
Good advice. Sleep is always good advice, but particularly you need to be refreshed. That's a good one. Any other things they can do to prepare? Anyone want to come in on that one?
I would just say, just mentally prepare yourself for knowing that if there's a possibility for it to go wrong, chances are at one stage it will go wrong. And, you know, just prepare to be in that situation where it feels like, you know, the whole world around you is erupting and you're stood in the center of it, not knowing what to do. Because you will find yourself in a situation like that. Like, you know, your technology will be down. I've heard cases where, you know, the whole school system's been down in some schools. Nobody ever is going to prepare themselves perfectly for that situation. It's just about having that kind of that integrity and that kind of like mental fortitude to be like, right, scrap everything I've just planned, let's move on, and just having that kind of that plan B. And so I always say your IT skills, brush up on your PowerPoints, brush up on kind of your Microsoft Pocket, your packages, make sure you know how to do animations, make sure you know how to make your class resources pretty, because, you know, a lot of the time that's half the battle. You know, if you put like a black and white resource on the screen, they're going to switch off straight away. But if you can make that resource pretty, aesthetic, be that through animations, be that through color, or be that through kind of good graphics, you've already got them hook, line and sinker, and they'll do anything for you. So that's my big tip, is brush up on your IT skills.
Excellent advice.
I've got one as well. One last from me then. So I think be brave, because I think at the start of the year you think, oh, I'm only just a trainee, and what can I do? And why would maybe the head of department or my colleagues who have more experience than me listen to me? But so my experience shows that you can just throw everything at them, because sometimes they're just really happy about new input and new ideas, and someone who actually wants to contribute to their department work and to their school work. So I think what I found was that I thought at the start of the year I wouldn't have a say in things, and now I feel, as I said earlier on, like fully accepted member. So I think just be brave and just try to just contribute to things and just share your ideas, and don't be afraid of maybe feedback you get to them.
Yeah, everyone's got something to offer. Doesn't matter if you're a trainee, you've still got loads to offer. So that's great advice, Joe. And Jolene's other bit of great advice is in the chat bar, which is to buy a diary. Without a diary or some sort of organisation, you know, you'll be scuppered. So make sure you've got a diary. I think there's been a question about skit routes, but Joe and Nadia have shared their emails. So if you'd like to get in touch with them, that might be the best way to answer that question. Any diary recommendations? I know some of our trainees have, what are those ones called that you all love, Nadia? The ones that are really pretty?
I've just popped it in the chat. I was just writing the message. Yeah, the Positive Teacher Company. I wish they were sponsoring me to say this. I've got my diary for next year already. They are incredible. But that being said, in fact, it's here right now. I use a bog standard WH Smith one at the moment, and it does the job. So you don't have to get like the most prettiest thing in the world, you know, as long as it's got something with your days where you can write down what you're doing. It does exactly the same thing. It's pocket size. But the Positive Teacher Company, they've got, you name it, they've got it. I think there's a teacher who runs the company, so she's been in that situation. She knows exactly what you need, and it's pretty stationary. So if you're one of those people who like having everything matching, or like everything to have glitter on it and sparkles on it, you've got that as well. So, you know, there's one for everything.
I've got to say,
They're amazing, and they're so pretty.
I'm going to say, I'm sure Alex is on commission, because on Twitter, him and a few others constantly tweet about them. So I'm sure there's a commission system going on here. It's like a pyramid scheme.
Have you not seen my my sports car when I arrive to school? that pays for the Ferrari.
I knew it.
Or
Right.
Red Hill offer you one if you don't want to pay. Mine's from the school. You could just wait till September when they give you one.
You can decorate it yourself, make it pretty.
Yeah, make it creative. Do it.
I didn't get one, so you can't rely on that, can you?
Outrageous. Right. Let me say thanks once again for everyone for joining. Alex is doing a self-promotion. And thank you for our speakers for contributing. Joe Broner, is anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up? You're on mute. Still on mute.
We can't hear you.
It always happens to Joe on these events for some reason. She's going to go for the chat bar option, I think. It's broken. Oh, never mind. Right, in which case, we'll let everyone go. But thank you so much for joining, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Have a good evening. Enjoy the sunshine.